I received the anonymous envelope on a Tuesday morning, and the contents inside would eventually expose the biggest financial scandal our neighborhood had ever seen. The envelope contained bank statements, spreadsheets, and handwritten notes that detailed years of systematic theft from our homeowners association. I stood in my kitchen in Scottsdale, Arizona, staring at the papers spread across my granite countertop, my coffee growing cold as I tried to comprehend the magnitude of what I was looking at. Someone had been stealing from us, and the numbers were staggering. Over $300,000 had vanished from our HOA accounts over the past 5 years. My name is David Chen, and I had lived in the Sonoran Vista community for 8 years. It was a nice neighborhood, the kind of place where people actually knew their neighbors and kids rode bikes in the cul-de-sacs until the streetlights came on. Our HOA dues were reasonable at $250 per month, and most of us never questioned where that money went. We assumed it paid for landscaping, pool maintenance, the community center, and all the other amenities that made Sonoran Vista a desirable place to live. I worked as a forensic accountant for a mid-sized firm in Phoenix, so reading financial documents was second nature to me. As I examined the papers, my professional instincts kicked in. The discrepancies were obvious once you knew what to look for: payments to vendors that did not exist, duplicate invoices for the same services, cash withdrawals that had no corresponding explanation in the meeting minutes. The pattern was clear and damning. The papers pointed to one person, Patricia Hendricks, our HOA treasurer. Patricia was a 52-year-old woman who had held the treasurer position for 6 years. She was exactly the type of person you would expect in an HOA leadership role, always organizing community events, sending passive-aggressive emails about lawn maintenance, and showing up at board meetings with color-coded binders. She drove a white Lexus SUV, wore designer sunglasses that probably cost more than my mortgage payment, and had an opinion about everything happening in the neighborhood. I needed to verify this information before making any accusations. Accusing someone of embezzlement was serious, and I wanted to be absolutely certain before I destroyed someone's reputation. I called my neighbor, Marcus Rodriguez, who served on the HOA board as the secretary. Marcus was a retired police detective, and I trusted his judgment. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about something sensitive," I said when he answered. "Can you come over?" 20 minutes later, Marcus sat at my kitchen table, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he examined the documents I had received. His expression grew darker with each page he turned. "Where did you get these?" he asked. "Anonymous. They showed up in my mailbox this morning." Marcus set down the papers and rubbed his temples. "I always thought something was off about Patricia. She would get defensive whenever anyone asked detailed questions about the finances. Last year, I requested copies of our bank statements for a routine review, and she delayed for 3 months. When she finally provided them, they were heavily redacted. Did you push back?" I asked. I tried, but the rest of the board shut me down. Patricia had been treasurer for so long that everyone just trusted her. Plus, she was friends with Deborah Winters, the HOA president. They played tennis together every Saturday morning. I knew Deborah. She was another typical HOA personality, always enforcing rules about garbage can placement and mailbox colors. She had once sent me a violation notice because my house number was half an inch too small according to the community guidelines. The idea that she might be complicit in the theft crossed my mind, but I pushed it aside. I needed evidence, not speculation. "What do we do with this?" Marcus asked, gesturing at the documents. "We need to get access to the official records and compare them to these papers. If this anonymous source is correct, the evidence will be in the bank statements and financial records. The HOA keeps everything in a storage unit that only board members can access. Patricia has the key to the filing cabinets where the financial documents are stored." I thought about this for a moment. "Can you request access as a board member?" Marcus nodded slowly. I can, but if Patricia is guilty, she will know we are looking. She might destroy evidence. Then we need to move fast. Request the access today. Say you are working on the annual audit or something routine. Do not give her time to cover her tracks. That afternoon, Marcus sent an email to the HOA board requesting access to the financial records for the upcoming annual meeting. He framed it as a routine review, nothing that would raise immediate red flags. Within 2 hours, Patricia responded with a lengthy email explaining that the records were being reorganized and would not be available for several weeks. She is stalling, Marcus said when he called me with the update. Of course she is. We need to escalate this. Do you have contacts in the police department who could help? I do, but they will need probable cause to get involved. An anonymous tip is not enough. I spent the next 2 days analyzing the documents I had received and cross-referencing them with the limited financial information available to homeowners. Our HOA published quarterly summaries, but they were vague and high-level. I started comparing those summaries to the detailed spreadsheets from the anonymous source, and the discrepancies became even more apparent. On Thursday evening, I decided to attend the HOA board meeting. These meetings were technically open to all homeowners, though few people bothered to show up. They were usually boring affairs where the board discussed landscaping bids and pool hours. Tonight would be different. The meeting was held in the community center, a modest building near the neighborhood entrance. When I arrived, 6 board members sat at a folding table at the front of the room. Patricia sat in the middle, her laptop open in front of her. Deborah Winters presided over the meeting with her usual self-important demeanor. About a dozen homeowners sat in the audience, most of them scrolling through their phones. I took a seat in the back row next to Marcus. He gave me a slight nod, and I knew he was ready for what was about to happen. The meeting started with the usual routine items. Deborah discussed a complaint about a homeowner who had painted their front door an unauthorized shade of blue. Someone else brought up concerns about teenagers skateboarding in the parking lot. Patricia gave a brief financial update, stating that the HOA reserves were healthy and all bills were being paid on time. When Deborah asked if there was any new business, I raised my hand. Yes, David. Deborah said, looking slightly annoyed that someone was prolonging the meeting. I stood up and pulled out a folder containing copies of some of the documents I had received. I have some questions about our financial statements. Specifically, I would like to understand some of the vendor payments that have been made over the past few years. Patricia's face went rigid. The financial statements are available for review. If you have questions, you can schedule an appointment with me. I have tried to review the detailed statements, but they are not readily available to homeowners. I am requesting that the board provide complete bank statements and vendor invoices for the past 5 years. Deborah intervened. David, that is an unusual request. What is this about? It is about transparency. As homeowners, we pay thousands of dollars per year in HOA dues. We have a right to know exactly how that money is being spent. Several homeowners in the audience murmured in agreement. I could see Patricia whispering something to Deborah. The board will take your request under consideration, Deborah said dismissively. Is there any other new business? Actually, there is, Marcus said, standing up. As a board member, I formally request that we conduct an independent audit of our finances. I have concerns about certain expenditures that do not align with our approved budgets. The room went silent. Patricia's face had gone pale, and her hands were trembling slightly as she closed her laptop. That is absurd, Patricia said, her voice rising. I have been treasurer for 6 years, and my records are impeccable. This is insulting. Then an audit should have no problem confirming that, Marcus replied calmly. Deborah looked uncomfortable. We can discuss this in executive session. Let us move on. No, I said firmly. This is a matter that affects every homeowner in this community. It should be discussed openly. Another homeowner, a woman named Jennifer who lived 2 streets over, raised her hand. I actually agree with David and Marcus. I have been wondering about some of our expenses too. Last year, we supposedly spent $40,000 on pool renovations, but the pool looks exactly the same. More homeowners began speaking up, asking questions about various expenses. The meeting was quickly spiraling out of Deborah's control. Patricia sat rigid in her chair, her jaw clenched. Finally, Deborah called for a vote on conducting an independent audit. The board voted 4-3 in favor, with Deborah and 2 other board members voting against it. Marcus had clearly lobbied some of his fellow board members before the meeting. "Fine," Patricia said, her voice cold. "I will provide everything to the auditor. But when this audit shows that everything is in order, I expect apologies from everyone who has questioned my integrity." The meeting adjourned shortly after, and homeowners filed out in small groups, whispering about what had just happened. I stayed behind with Marcus as the board members packed up their materials. Patricia approached us, her face flushed with anger. "You two have no idea what you have started. I could sue you for defamation." "Truth is an absolute defense against defamation," I replied. "And we have only asked for an audit. If everything is legitimate, you have nothing to worry about." "You are going to regret this," she hissed before storming out. Marcus and I exchanged glances. "She is scared," he said quietly. "She should be." Over the next week, the HOA hired an independent auditing firm called Arizona Financial Services to examine our books. The auditors requested access to all bank statements, invoices, receipts, and financial records dating back 5 years. Patricia initially cooperated, providing boxes of documents to the auditors. I stayed in close contact with Marcus, who reported that the auditors were finding numerous irregularities. Patricia's story began to unravel quickly. Invoices from vendors that did not exist. Payments to companies with no legitimate business registration. Cash withdrawals that Patricia could not explain. On a Friday afternoon, 2 weeks after the audit began, I received a call from Marcus. His voice was shaking. "You need to get over here right now. Patricia just showed up at an emergency board meeting, and you are not going to believe what she said." I drove to the community center, my mind racing with possibilities. When I walked into the meeting room, I found the entire board assembled, along with the 2 auditors from Arizona Financial Services. Patricia sat at the table, her face blotchy and tear-streaked. Marcus pulled me aside. "She confessed," he whispered. "She just admitted to everything." I took a seat in the back of the room as one of the auditors. A middle-aged man named Richard Stanton addressed the board. "Based on our review, we have identified approximately $318,000 in unauthorized withdrawals and fraudulent expenses over a 5-year period. Ms. Hendricks has acknowledged responsibility for these actions." Deborah looked like she was going to be sick. "Patricia, why would you do this?" Patricia's voice was barely audible. "It started small. I borrowed $5,000 to cover my daughter's college tuition. I intended to pay it back, but I never did. Then my husband lost his job and we had medical bills. It just kept getting worse. I kept telling myself I would replace the money, but I never could." $300,000, one of the board members said in disbelief. "How did we not notice?" "I manipulated the reports," Patricia admitted. "I created fake invoices and vendor accounts. I would show the board summary reports that looked normal, but the actual expenses were completely different. I have been covering one theft with another for years." The room was silent except for Patricia's quiet sobbing. I felt a mix of anger and pity. She had stolen from hundreds of families, from people who worked hard to pay their HOA dues and trusted that the money was being used appropriately. But she was also clearly a broken person who had made terrible choices. "What happens now?" Deborah asked the auditors. "That is up to the board and the homeowners," Richard said. "From a financial perspective, your HOA has been defrauded of a significant amount of money. You have several options. You can report this to the police and pursue criminal charges. You can file a civil lawsuit to recover the stolen funds, or you can attempt to negotiate a settlement with Miss Hendricks. I will give back whatever I can," Patricia said desperately. "I can take out a loan against my house. I will sell my car. Please, I do not want to go to jail." Marcus looked at me, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. He was a former cop, trained to uphold the law, but he was also a compassionate person who understood that people made mistakes. "This is not a decision the board should make alone," I said, standing up. "Every homeowner in this community has been victimized. They deserve to know what happened and have a say in how we respond." Deborah nodded reluctantly. "You are right. We need to call an emergency community meeting." The emergency meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening. The board sent out an email to all 342 homeowners in Sonoran Vista, explaining that a serious financial matter had been discovered, and that attendance was strongly encouraged. On Tuesday night, the community center was packed. People stood along the walls and crowded the doorways. The energy in the room was tense and angry. Word had already spread through the neighborhood that Patricia had confessed to embezzling HOA funds. Deborah opened the meeting by explaining what the audit had uncovered. As she detailed the scope of the theft, the room erupted in angry shouts and questions. People wanted to know how this could have happened, why the board had not caught it sooner, and what was being done to recover the money. "We are exploring all options," Deborah said weakly. "Patricia has offered to repay what she can." "That is not good enough," someone shouted from the back. "She stole from us for years. She should be in prison." Others echoed this sentiment. The mood in the room was turning ugly. I stood up and asked for permission to speak. "I understand everyone's anger," I said, "but we need to think strategically about how to handle this. If we report Patricia to the police, she will likely be arrested and charged with embezzlement. She might go to prison, but that does not guarantee we will get our money back. In fact, if she is incarcerated, our chances of recovering anything drop significantly." "So what are you suggesting?" Jennifer asked. "That we just let her get away with it?" "No. I am suggesting that we explore a civil remedy first. We can file a lawsuit against Patricia to recover the stolen funds. We can place liens on her assets and garnish her wages. If she does not cooperate, or if we determine that criminal prosecution is necessary, we can always involve the police later. But right now, our priority should be getting our money back." Marcus stood up as well. "David is right. As a retired detective, I can tell you that white-collar crime cases are complicated. Even if Patricia is convicted, the court will not necessarily order restitution in the full amount. And if she declares bankruptcy, we might end up with nothing. A civil lawsuit gives us more control over the outcome." The crowd was still angry, but people were starting to listen. A man named Robert, who worked as a lawyer, stood up. "If we are going to file a civil lawsuit, we should consider making it a class action. That way, all affected homeowners can be represented and we can share the legal costs." "That is a good idea," I said, "but we would need to find an attorney who specializes in this type of case." "I know someone," Robert said. "My firm does not handle class actions, but I have a colleague who does. Her name is Amanda Reeves, and she is one of the best in Arizona. I can reach out to her." The meeting continued for another hour, with homeowners asking questions and voicing their concerns. By the end, there was a general consensus that we should pursue a class action lawsuit. A committee was formed to coordinate the legal effort, and I was asked to chair it given my background in forensic accounting. Over the next few days, Robert arranged for Amanda Reeves to meet with the committee. Amanda was a sharp woman in her early 40s with a reputation for taking on complex financial cases. She listened carefully as we explained the situation and reviewed the evidence from the audit. "This is a strong case," Amanda said. "Patricia has already confessed, which eliminates the biggest challenge in most embezzlement cases. The question is whether she has any assets we can recover." "She owns her home," Marcus said. "It is worth about $600,000, and I think she has maybe $200,000 in equity." "What about other assets, retirement accounts, investments?" "We do not know yet," I admitted. We would need to conduct discovery to identify all her assets. That will be part of the lawsuit, Amanda explained. Once we file, we can subpoena her financial records and conduct depositions. We can also request a temporary restraining order to prevent her from transferring or hiding assets. What are the chances we can recover the full amount? Someone asked. Amanda was honest. Unlikely. In most embezzlement cases, the stolen funds have already been spent. But we can pursue her assets, her wages, and potentially her spouse's assets if Arizona's community property laws apply. I would estimate you might recover between 30% and 50% of the stolen amount if we are aggressive. That is better than nothing, I said. What do we need to do to move forward? I will need signed retainer agreements from the homeowners who want to participate in the class action. My fee structure for a case like this would be on contingency. I take 30% of whatever we recover plus costs. If we do not recover anything, you do not pay me. The committee discussed Amanda's proposal and agreed to move forward. Over the next 2 weeks, we collected signed retainer agreements from 278 homeowners, representing over 80% of the community. The remaining homeowners either could not be reached or chose not to participate. Amanda filed the class action lawsuit in Maricopa County Superior Court on a Monday morning in early December. The lawsuit named Patricia Hendricks as the defendant and alleged breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, conversion, and unjust enrichment. We requested damages in the amount of $318,000, plus interest, attorney fees, and costs. The lawsuit had to be served on Patricia personally. A process server delivered the papers to her home on a Wednesday afternoon. According to the process server's report, Patricia answered the door in her bathrobe and broke down crying when she realized what was happening. 2 days later, Patricia hired an attorney named Gerald Murphy to represent her. Gerald was a local defense attorney who specialized in civil litigation. He filed a response to our lawsuit admitting to the embezzlement, but arguing that Patricia lacked the financial resources to repay the full amount. She is offering $50,000 to settle, Amanda told me during a phone call. She will take out a home equity loan and pay it in installments over 5 years. That is 15% of what she stole, I said, incredulous. That is insulting. I agree. I told her attorney we are not interested. We are going to pursue this aggressively. True to her word, Amanda filed a motion for a temporary restraining order to freeze Patricia's assets. The judge granted the motion, preventing Patricia from selling her house, transferring money, or disposing of any significant assets without court approval. Discovery began in January. Amanda subpoenaed Patricia's bank records, credit card statements, tax returns, and employment records. She also deposed Patricia and her husband, a man named Roger who worked as a regional manager for a grocery store chain. I attended Patricia's deposition, which took place in a conference room at Amanda's law office in downtown Phoenix. Patricia looked haggard, like she had not slept in weeks. Her attorney sat beside her, occasionally objecting to Amanda's questions. Amanda was thorough and relentless. She walked Patricia through every fraudulent transaction, asking her to explain where the money had gone. Patricia admitted to using the stolen funds for a variety of expenses: college tuition for her daughter, medical bills from her husband's cancer treatment 3 years earlier, credit card debt, a kitchen renovation, a vacation to Hawaii. Did you ever intend to repay the money you stole? Amanda asked. Yes, Patricia said quietly. I always told myself I would pay it back, but I never could. The amount just kept getting bigger. Yet you continued to steal more money, even as recently as last month. I know, I was desperate. I did not know how to stop. The deposition lasted 6 hours. By the end, Amanda had extracted admissions that would make it nearly impossible for Patricia to defend against the lawsuit. But the more difficult question remained: how much could we actually recover? The financial documents told a discouraging story. Patricia and Roger's house had about $220,000 in equity, but they also had significant debt. Credit cards, medical bills, and a car loan totaled nearly $80,000. Roger made about $60,000 per year at his job, and Patricia had been unemployed since resigning from the HOA board after her confession. Even if we force the sale of her house and garnish Roger's wages, we are looking at maybe $150,000 in total recovery over several years, Amanda told the committee during a meeting in February. And that is if everything goes perfectly. The committee was frustrated but realistic. We had known from the beginning that recovering the full amount would be difficult. Still, it was disheartening to realize that Patricia had stolen $300,000, but most of it was simply gone, spent on everyday expenses that left no recoverable assets. What if we pursue criminal charges in addition to the civil lawsuit? Marcus suggested. Maybe the threat of prison time would motivate her to find a way to pay more. Amanda considered this. It is an option, but you should know that criminal prosecution could actually complicate the civil case. If Patricia is convicted and sentenced to prison, her earning potential drops to zero. That makes it harder to collect on any judgment we obtain. So we are stuck between getting some money or getting justice, but not both, Jennifer said bitterly. That is often the reality in these cases, Amanda said sympathetically. I thought about the situation for a moment. What if we negotiate a structured settlement? Something that incentivizes Patricia to repay as much as possible over time, with the understanding that if she fails to meet the payment schedule, we will refer the matter to law enforcement. That could work, Amanda said. We would need her to agree to a payment plan and secure it with a confession of judgment. If she defaults, we can immediately execute on her assets. And we include a provision that criminal prosecution remains an option if she does not comply. The committee authorized Amanda to explore a settlement along those lines. Over the next month, Amanda negotiated with Gerald Murphy. The discussions were contentious, with Patricia's attorney arguing that his client was being asked to pay more than she could afford. Finally, in late March, we reached an agreement. Patricia would pay $200,000 over 7 years. The payment would be secured by a lien on her house, and if she defaulted, we could force the sale of the property. Patricia also agreed to a confession of judgment, meaning she admitted liability and consented to a judgment without the need for a trial. Additionally, the settlement included a provision that if Patricia failed to make payments as scheduled, the HOA reserved the right to refer the matter to law enforcement for criminal prosecution. It was not everything we wanted, but it was a reasonable outcome given the circumstances. The settlement was presented to the homeowners at a community meeting in April. While some people were unhappy that Patricia would not face criminal charges immediately, most understood that recovering funds was the priority. The settlement was finalized in May, and Patricia began making monthly payments of $2,400. The money was deposited into a court-supervised account and distributed proportionally to the homeowners who had participated in the class action. But the story did not end there. In August, Patricia missed her first payment. Amanda immediately sent a demand letter warning that any further missed payments would result in foreclosure proceedings and referral to law enforcement. Patricia caught up the following month, blaming the missed payment on a temporary cash flow problem. Then, in November, Patricia missed 2 consecutive payments. This time, she did not respond to Amanda's demand letters. When Amanda attempted to contact her attorney, Gerald Murphy informed us that Patricia had terminated his services and that he no longer represented her. She is defaulting, Amanda told me over the phone. We need to decide how to proceed. The committee met to discuss the situation. We had 2 options: initiate foreclosure proceedings to force the sale of Patricia's house or report her to law enforcement for criminal prosecution. I vote for both, Marcus said firmly. She had a chance to make this right and she is choosing not to. That tells me she is not taking this seriously. The rest of the committee agreed. Amanda filed a motion to enforce the judgment and began foreclosure proceedings. Simultaneously, I prepared a detailed report documenting the embezzlement and Patricia's failure to comply with the settlement agreement. I delivered the report to the Scottsdale Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Detective Sarah Thornton was assigned to the case. She was a seasoned investigator with years of experience handling white-collar crime. I met with her at the police station and walked her through the evidence. The audit reports, Patricia's confession, the settlement agreement, and her subsequent default painted a clear picture. "This is a solid case," Detective Thornton said. "I will present it to the county attorney's office and recommend charges." 2 weeks later, the Maricopa County Attorney's Office filed criminal charges against Patricia Hendricks. She was charged with felony theft, fraudulent schemes, and forgery. Each charge carried potential prison time. Patricia was arrested on a cold morning in January. According to the police report, she was taken into custody without incident at her home. Her bond was set at $100,000, which she posted using a bail bondsman. The criminal case moved forward parallel to our civil proceedings. In March, Patricia appeared in court with a public defender and pleaded not guilty to all charges. Her attorney argued that she had already been punished through the civil lawsuit and that incarceration would serve no purpose. The prosecutor, an assistant county attorney named Michael Torres, disagreed. Miss Hendricks stole over $300,000 from her neighbors over a period of 5 years. She abused her position of trust as HOA treasurer and showed no remorse until she was caught. When given an opportunity to make restitution through a settlement agreement, she defaulted. This defendant has demonstrated that she cannot be trusted to comply with court orders without the threat of incarceration. The case went to trial in June. I was called as a witness and testified about the financial analysis I had conducted and the evidence of embezzlement. Marcus testified about the HOA's governance structure and how Patricia had manipulated the board. The auditors from Arizona Financial Services provided expert testimony about the fraudulent transactions. Patricia's defense attorney tried to paint her as a desperate woman who had made mistakes due to financial hardship. He highlighted her husband's cancer treatment and the medical debt they had incurred. He argued that Patricia had not spent the money on luxury items but on basic necessities and family emergencies. The jury deliberated for 8 hours before returning a verdict. Patricia was found guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. At the sentencing hearing, Patricia addressed the court. She was crying as she spoke. "I know what I did was wrong. I betrayed my neighbors and my community. I am ashamed and sorry. I never intended for it to go this far. I just kept making one bad decision after another. I understand if you feel I deserve to go to prison, but I am asking for mercy. I want to make this right." Several homeowners from Sonoran Vista were present at the hearing. Some spoke about the impact of Patricia's theft on the community. Jennifer described how the HOA had been forced to increase dues to cover the budget shortfall caused by the embezzlement. Another homeowner talked about the erosion of trust in the neighborhood. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to be balanced. What Patricia did was a serious crime that affected hundreds of families, but I also believe that people deserve a chance at redemption. If the court chooses to show leniency, I hope it will be paired with a robust restitution order and consequences for non-compliance. The judge, a stern woman named Honorable Linda Martinez, listened carefully to all the testimony. When it was time to deliver the sentence, she did not mince words. "Miss Hendricks, you committed a calculated and sustained theft over many years. You violated the trust of your neighbors and manipulated the HOA's financial systems to conceal your crimes. While I acknowledge the financial difficulties you faced, many people experience hardship without resorting to theft. Your actions were a choice, and choices have consequences." Judge Martinez sentenced Patricia to 5 years in prison but suspended 4 years of the sentence. Patricia would serve 1 year in county jail, followed by 4 years of supervised probation. As a condition of probation, she was ordered to pay full restitution of $318,000. If she violated probation or failed to make restitution payments, the suspended prison sentence could be imposed. Patricia was taken into custody immediately to begin serving her jail sentence. Her husband Roger sat in the courtroom, his face in his hands. Over the following months, our foreclosure proceedings on Patricia's house moved forward. The property was sold at auction for $580,000. After paying off the mortgage and other liens, about $190,000 remained. Combined with the payments Patricia had made before defaulting, the total recovery from the civil case came to about $208,000. It was not the full amount, but it was significantly more than the initial settlement offer of $50,000. The funds were distributed proportionally to the participating homeowners. Each household received approximately 65% of what they had lost to Patricia's theft. Patricia served her full year in jail and was released in July of the following year. She was required to report to a probation officer monthly and was making minimum wage working at a retail store. Her probation officer established a restitution payment schedule based on her income. At her current earnings, it would take decades to repay the remaining debt, but she was making an effort. The experience changed our community in profound ways. The HOA implemented new financial controls, including mandatory annual audits by independent firms and a requirement that no single board member have sole access to financial accounts. We established a finance committee with rotating members to provide oversight of all expenditures. Deborah Winters resigned as HOA president shortly after Patricia's confession, feeling that she had failed in her oversight responsibilities. Marcus was elected as the new president, and he brought a level of transparency and accountability that the HOA had never had before. Monthly financial reports were now posted on the community website, and homeowners could review detailed transaction records at any time. As for me, I stepped down from the legal committee once the civil case was resolved. I had spent nearly 2 years dealing with Patricia's embezzlement, and I was ready to return to normal life. But the experience had taught me valuable lessons about the importance of vigilance and accountability in community organizations. One evening in late September, almost 3 years after receiving that anonymous envelope, I was working in my garage when Roger Hendricks approached. I had not spoken to him since Patricia's arrest. He looked older, worn down by the ordeal his family had endured. "I know you probably do not want to talk to me," Roger said hesitantly, "but I wanted to thank you. I was confused. Thank me for what? For pushing for the civil settlement first. If you had gone straight to the police, Patricia would probably be in prison for 5 years and we would have lost everything. The way you handled it gave us a chance to keep some stability. My wife made terrible mistakes, but she is not a bad person. She is trying to make amends." I did not know what to say. Part of me was still angry about what Patricia had done, but I also recognized that the situation was more complicated than simple villainy. People made bad choices for complex reasons, and sometimes the line between victim and perpetrator was blurry. "I hope Patricia can turn things around," I said finally, "but she needs to understand that trust, once broken, is very hard to rebuild." "She knows that," Roger said quietly. "She knows." He thanked me again and walked back down the street toward his rental apartment. Patricia and Roger had been forced to downsize significantly after the foreclosure, moving from their spacious house to a small 2-bedroom unit on the edge of the neighborhood. As I watched him go, I reflected on everything that had happened. An anonymous tip had exposed years of theft. A confession had led to a class action lawsuit. A default on a settlement had resulted in criminal prosecution. And now, a community was slowly healing from the betrayal while a family struggled to rebuild their lives. The entire experience had been exhausting, frustrating, and at times overwhelming. But it had also demonstrated something important about community. When people came together with a common purpose, they could hold wrongdoers accountable and create positive change. The system was not perfect, and justice was often incomplete, but it was better than looking the other way. I never found out who sent me that anonymous envelope. I had my suspicions. Perhaps it was a board member who had noticed irregularities but was afraid to speak up. Maybe it was a vendor who had been stiffed on a payment and dug into the HOA's finances. Or it could have been someone close to Patricia who knew what she was doing and wanted it to stop. Whoever it was, they had done the right thing. They had trusted that someone would act on the information, and their trust had not been misplaced. The truth had come out, and while the resolution was messy and imperfect, it was a resolution nonetheless. As I returned to working on my car, I thought about the nature of communities and the responsibilities we have to each other. We entrust certain people with authority and access to shared resources. When that trust is violated, we have an obligation to seek accountability. Not out of vindictiveness, but because accountability is what holds communities together. The Sonoran Vista HOA was stronger now than it had been before Patricia's theft. We had learned from our mistakes, implemented better safeguards, and created a culture of transparency. Homeowners were more engaged and more willing to ask questions. The board was more responsive and more careful with our money. In a strange way, Patricia's betrayal had made us better. It had forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about oversight and governance. It had taught us that trust must be earned and constantly reinforced through actions, not just words. Years later, I still live in Sonoran Vista. The neighborhood has continued to thrive, with property values increasing and new families moving in. The community center was renovated using funds from the restitution payments, and the pool was finally upgraded. Kids still ride their bikes in the cul-de-sacs, and neighbors still know each other's names. Patricia eventually completed her probation and moved away from Scottsdale. I heard through the grapevine that she and Roger relocated to a smaller town in northern Arizona where they could start fresh. I hope they found some measure of peace and that Patricia truly learned from her mistakes. The story of the HOA treasurer who confessed to stealing from every homeowner became a cautionary tale in our community. New board members are told the story during their orientation as a reminder of why financial controls and transparency matter. It serves as a warning about what can happen when oversight is lacking and trust is given too freely. For my part, I have tried to stay involved in the HOA without letting it consume my life. I attend meetings regularly and ask questions when something does not make sense. I volunteer for the Finance Committee on a rotating basis, helping to review budgets and expenditures. But I also know when to step back and let others lead. The experience taught me that ordinary people can make a difference when they are willing to stand up for what is right. It is not always easy or comfortable. There were times when I questioned whether the effort was worth it, whether it would have been simpler to just let Patricia get away with a token payment and move on with my life. But I am glad I did not take that path. I am glad that Marcus and I pushed for accountability, that Amanda fought aggressively on behalf of the homeowners, and that the justice system ultimately held Patricia responsible for her actions. The outcome was not perfect, but it was just. As I finished my work in the garage and headed inside for dinner, I felt a sense of satisfaction. Not because I had destroyed someone's life or extracted revenge, but because I had helped my community recover from a significant betrayal. We had faced a crisis, responded with determination and intelligence, and emerged stronger on the other side. That anonymous envelope had arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning, and it had set in motion a chain of events that would span years and affect hundreds of lives. It had exposed corruption, led to a major lawsuit, resulted in criminal prosecution, and ultimately brought some measure of justice and restitution. Most importantly, it had reminded me that communities are built on trust, maintained through accountability, and strengthened when people are willing to do the hard work of seeking truth and enforcing consequences. The Sonoran Vista HOA had been tested, and we had passed that test. The story did not have a fairy tale ending where everyone lived happily ever after. Patricia still owed significant restitution that she might never fully repay. Some homeowners never received complete compensation for their losses. The community had spent time, money, and emotional energy dealing with the fallout from the embezzlement, but we had survived. We had adapted, and we had created systems to prevent similar betrayals in the future. That was enough. Sometimes, justice is not about perfect outcomes. It is about doing the best you can with imperfect situations and refusing to accept wrongdoing without consequence. As I sat down to dinner that evening, I thought about all the ordinary people who had played a role in this story. The anonymous tipster who had taken a risk. Marcus, who had used his experience and connections to support the investigation. Jennifer and the other homeowners who had spoken up at meetings. Amanda Reeves, who had fought tenaciously for her clients. Detective Thornton and the prosecutors who had pursued criminal charges. Judge Martinez, who had imposed a sentence that balanced punishment with the possibility of redemption. Each person had contributed something essential. Each had chosen to act rather than remain passive. And collectively, those individual choices had made all the difference. The sun was setting over the Arizona desert, casting long shadows across my backyard. I could hear children playing in the distance and the faint hum of evening traffic on the main road outside our community. Life in Sonoran Vista had returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal that incorporated the lessons we had learned. The HOA treasurer had confessed to stealing from every homeowner. I had organized a class action lawsuit. We had pursued both civil and criminal remedies. And in the end, we had achieved a measure of justice that, while imperfect, reflected our community's values and determination. It was a story about betrayal and accountability, about financial crime and legal remedies, about anger and forgiveness. But most of all, it was a story about what happens when ordinary people refuse to accept wrongdoing and are willing to fight for what is right, even when that fight is long and difficult and uncertain. And that, I realized, was the real victory. Not the money recovered or the sentence imposed, but the demonstration that communities could police themselves, hold leaders accountable, and emerge stronger from adversity. It was a lesson worth remembering and a story worth telling.